The only thing is that we can't click on these just yet. So now we're going to be implementing that kind of click functionality. And this is where it starts to get quite complicated. Now we need to look at using React Spring within this application. So let's first have a look at the React Spring docs, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a run through with what we're working with here if you haven't seen that before. So this is React Spring, and it essentially allows you to do animations inside of React in a really nice declarative way. And I'm going to be using this quite effectively in this project to implement the Springboard. So it has quite a few different APIs here. It does support hooks as well, and it can do some really, really cool stuff. So let's have a look at one of the slightly more advanced examples here, which would be this chain animation I saw before. But anyways, let's just get straight into it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to be adding in this overlay on the backdrop before the folders even show up. So in order to do that, actually even before that, is we need to be able to figure out which folder is currently selected. So that is something which belongs inside of Springboard. So what we're going to do here is just write const open folder ID, and then set open folder ID is equal to use state, and then the state here is going to be null, like that. So now that we've got that here, and it is going down onto the next line because of my prettier spacing, which looks kind of weird, but whatever. We are going to add use state into our imports list here as well. And what we're going to do is we are going to specify here another prop, which is on open, and we are going to do set open folder ID equal to folder.id, like that. So this folder ID essentially goes here, and then we set that to the open folder ID. So now we have on open, which we're going to implement inside of here. So we're going to just add another prop here called on open. And I like to remap all of my event listeners like on open to another function name called push, and then the event name. So in this case, push open. And what we'll do is just on the wrapper here, we're going to do on click is equal to push open. Well, actually, more correctly speaking, you probably want to do something like this. And the reason for that is just so we don't have any arguments being passed through. But I mean, either way, it doesn't really matter here. And now we have a state variable, which really doesn't do that much, but we can kind of have a look at it, I guess. So we can put a, say, strong tag here, and then opened folder ID. So we can just confirm that it is in fact working. So if we can see that here somewhere on the page, currently it's null, but then this should give us 1. This should give us 2, and then 3. It's really hard to see, but it's over there. 1, 2, 3. And if we click this one, it should give us 4. So now we've got that. And you'll notice that this one actually appears all the way down on the page. This is a good time to address that issue as well. And the reason for that is because of our display grid. So I'm going to show you how to fix that. But first and foremost, let's add in another one. So let's say number 5, and we'll call this one gaming, just so we can see it in action, and you'll see what I mean. So the gaming actually appears all the way down here. So in order to fix this problem, inside of our Springboard, what we're going to do is we are going to add grid auto rows min content. So this basically means set the height of each row to the minimum size possible based on the content. So now if we go here, you'll notice that our gaming appears up top where it should be, and now we can remove gaming as well. So now that we have an open folder ID, what we can actually do is we can figure out if we have a folder that's currently open or we have nothing open at all. So what we're going to do here is create another component called open folder backdrop. And this one's going to take in a prop called is visible. And to determine its visibility, we simply write open folder ID is not equal to null. So if we have a folder ID, essentially if this is not null, then we have opened something on the page. So that's what we're going to use here. And now we're going to create open folder backdrop. So first and foremost, let's import it up here. We've got open folder backdrop. And inside of Springboard over here, because we're using it in Springboard, we're going to create this component. So create it like that, right click, new file, index.js, create this file here as well. So now we have open folder backdrop. Let's write this one up. So for this file here, once again, let's add in a wrapper. So this one's going to be a style.div, and we are going to go here and do import styled from styled components, obviously. And inside of here, we are going to do height 100%, width 100%, position absolute. Let's do left 0, top 0. And let's also add a hover effect of cursor pointer. And then for the blur effect, we're actually going to do backdrop filter blur, and let's just do 20 pixels here. So this is going to be our blur effect. And this is quite new. So its support is kind of dodgy in browsers, and even in Google Chrome, the support is still kind of flaky as well. But we're going to use it because it is really the only thing which allows us to achieve that kind of effect here. So now that we've got that, let's go into our open folder backdrop, and we are going to add in our wrapper. So this is how we normally do it, is we have a wrapper here, and we have an isVisible prop. So if isVisible, then we return the wrapper, otherwise we return null. So something like this would in fact work if I can just get this working on this page here and get built. Now if we have a look at our code, we've got our 4 things here, and if I click on it, it shows the whole thing blurred out. And then if I refresh, which is the only way to go back, then I can click on something else and the whole thing blurs like this. Now you notice that these lines here are blurred as well. And the reason for that is because our open folder backdrop actually takes up the whole page and it doesn't conform to the size of our Springboard. So in order to fix that, inside of our Springboard here, we simply need to add position relative to our wrapper. So now that we've done that, if we click on this again, you'll notice that only this part becomes blurred, and this blur effect is actually the same blur effect going on over here. So we just need to zoom this in a little, and it's the exact same blur effect. However, this blur effect goes straight from 0 to 100. There is no animation. So I feel like this is a really good time for us to get React Spring into this component here. So what we're going to do is we are going to be importing animated and use Spring from React Spring. So specifically, animated allows us to work with different components. I'll show that in a second. And use Spring essentially sets up a spring between a value and say any other value, or which you might change it to. So I'll show you how to use that right now. First and foremost, we're going to go into here and we are going to write const spring is equal to use spring, and our spring will take in an object, and inside of this object, we can specify one or more properties. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a property called open amount, and this one's going to take a value, which is if is visible, then it's going to be 1, otherwise it's going to be 0. So what actually happens is React Spring allows us to animate between the values 1 and 0 in this case, and I'll show you how we do that in just a second. But for our wrapper here, instead of rendering it conditionally, we're always going to render the wrapper like that. So now that we've done that, what we're going to do is let's just first get a primitive version of this working. So for the styled here, we're going to make this, instead of styled.div, we're going to use styled as a function, and we're going to do animated.div like that. So animated.div is in fact a div component, and we can use that with styled components. So we can basically use React Spring with styled components like this, which allows us to create a styled animated component. So that's pretty cool. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an object here called style. And for our style object, inside of here, we're going to specify opacity. So opacity, we're going to set equal to spring.openAmount directly. Now, the reason for that is because open amount goes from 1 to 0. So if open amount is 1, then opacity will also be 1 and it will be showing. If open amount is 0, then opacity will be 0 and it will disappear. So we don't need to do any fancy magic here. So now we're going to add that as a style prop into our style, and React Spring will take care of all the rest of the animation. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to add pointer events none here, because if we don't add this, then we won't be able to click on the items behind it, because this one, even with opacity 0, it still is a click target, so we can't actually click past it. But by doing pointer events none, it does allow us to do that. So now that it's finished building, we're going to go back into Google Chrome here. Just go over here and refresh that real quick. Not sure what that error was. Now, if I click on it, you'll notice that we get a really nice smooth animation into this state here. However, we don't have a way to animate out of it.